My name is Caitlin Miller, and at 22, I stood at my college graduation podium with my heart racing. I never imagined my magna cum laude moment would become a battlefield. The paper trembled in my hand, not my prepared speech, but an envelope containing a truth that would shatter my family forever. Across the crowd, my father Richard glared with a mixture of rage and disgust, unaware that his public cruelty was about to backfire spectacularly. Before I tell you how my perfect day turned into a family nightmare, let me know where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing up to toxic family members. My childhood memories are a strange mix of what seemed like happiness on the surface, but always had this undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite understand as a kid. Our family photos showed smiling faces at birthday parties and holiday gatherings, but the camera never captured what happened before or after those perfect moments. My father, Richard Miller, was successful in his career as a financial advisor. He drove a nice car, provided a comfortable home in the suburbs of Boston, and made sure we never wanted for anything material. But emotional warmth? That was a different story, at least when it came to me. From my earliest memories, I sensed a difference in how he treated me compared to my younger brother Kevin. Kevin was 3 years younger, and from the moment he was born, it was clear he was the favorite. When Kevin took his first steps, Dad recorded every moment, proudly showing the video to anyone who visited. When I won my first spelling bee in 2nd grade, he merely nodded and said, "That should be expected." My mother Eleanor was beautiful, kind, but perpetually anxious. She walked on eggshells around my father, always trying to anticipate his moods, to smooth over any potential conflicts. Now I understand she was constantly running interference, especially between my father and me, though I didn't recognize it then. "Caitlin, maybe you should keep your voice down when telling your father about your test score," she would whisper. "Or maybe don't mention that you want to join the debate team right now. Let me talk to him first." Everything with my father required strategy, careful timing, the right approach. When I was 12, I entered the regional science fair with a project on renewable energy. I worked on it for months, staying late after school, researching at the library on weekends. When I won first place, I was ecstatic. My mother hugged me tightly, her eyes shining with pride. "Your father will be so impressed," she promised. But when we got home and I showed him the blue ribbon and certificate, he barely glanced up from his newspaper. "Science fairs are just popularity contests," he said. "The judges probably felt sorry for you." I remember fighting back tears, clutching my ribbon so tightly my nails left marks in my palm. My mother quickly suggested ice cream to celebrate, shooting my father a look I couldn't interpret at the time. That became the pattern of my childhood and adolescence. Every achievement was met with dismissal or criticism. Every milestone became a moment of anxiety instead of celebration. Would this finally be the thing that made my father proud? It never was. The only person who seemed genuinely proud of me was my grandfather, Richard's father, who lived about an hour away. During our occasional visits, he would make a point of talking to me about my interests, complimenting my intelligence. I noticed how this seemed to irritate my father. "You always did have a soft spot for her," he once said to Grandpa with an edge in his voice I couldn't understand. "She reminds me of my side of the family," Grandpa replied simply. There were other strange comments over the years from extended family. At a reunion when I was 14, my father's cousin remarked, "It's funny, she doesn't look anything like you, Richard." My father had quickly changed the subject, and my mother spilled her drink almost immediately after, creating a distraction. Another oddity I noticed as I got older was the lack of baby pictures of me compared to the abundance of Kevin's. Our family albums showed Kevin's first everything, meticulously documented. For me, the photos began when I was already walking, around 18 months old. When I asked my mother about this, she became flustered. "We had camera problems when you were born," she said vaguely. And then we moved, and some boxes of photos were lost. It was a plausible explanation, but something about her nervous delivery made me wonder. Still, I didn't dwell on it. I was too busy trying to be perfect to finally earn the approval that always seemed just out of reach. My father had rules for everything, expectations that seemed to shift the moment I met them. I needed straight A's, but being a know-it-all was unacceptable. I should be social and well-liked, but spending too much time with friends meant I wasn't focused on my future. I should be attractive but not vain, confident but not proud. It was exhausting, this constant attempt to solve an impossible puzzle. But I tried, year after year. I tried to be the daughter he wanted. I kept thinking that somewhere inside him was the capacity to love me the way he loved my brother. I just needed to find the right key to unlock it. By the time I reached high school, I had become an expert at reading my father's moods, at navigating the minefield of his expectations. I had also become determined to escape. Education became my ticket out, my path to freedom. I threw myself into academics with renewed purpose, no longer just seeking his approval, but planning my independence. What I didn't realize then was that the mystery of my father's coldness toward me had an explanation far beyond his difficult personality or high standards. The truth was buried in hospital records and birth certificates, in whispered conversations and family secrets. A truth that would eventually explode on what should have been the proudest day of my life. High school brought new tensions to our already strained family dynamic. As I developed my own opinions and personality, the controlling grip my father maintained became increasingly difficult to bear. He monitored my friendships, questioning who I spent time with and why. My curfew was earlier than anyone else's in my social circle. My clothing choices were scrutinized for being too revealing even when they were perfectly modest. "I don't understand why you need to go to Sarah's house again," he would say. "You were just there last weekend." "We're working on a history project," I would explain, though we had finished it days ago. In reality, Sarah's house was the one place I could breathe freely, where parents asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. My academic performance remained stellar, partly because excellence had become a habit, and partly because I knew it was my only way out. By junior year, I was ranked first in my class, taking every AP course available and beginning to research colleges. This is where the real battle began. My father had always made it clear that he expected me to attend the state university where he had connections. It was a good school, but I had bigger dreams. Princeton had been my goal since I was 14 when a visiting alumnus spoke at our school. The academic rigor, the opportunities, the distance from home all appealed to me. When the glossy Princeton brochures began arriving in our mailbox, my father would casually misplace them. When I mentioned the school at dinner, he would change the subject. But I persisted, requesting information sent to Sarah's address instead, scheduling campus tours when he was away on business trips. My mother, in her quiet way, supported me. "Just apply," she whispered one night after he had gone to bed. You never know what might happen. The confrontation came when my application was due. I needed his financial information to complete the forms. "Why would I give you that?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "You're not applying there." "I am," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I've completed everything else. I just need the financial section." "This is ridiculous," he said. "Even if you got in, which you won't, we can't afford it." "I'll get scholarships," I countered. "And they have excellent financial aid." The argument escalated until he was standing over me, face red with anger. "If you go there, you're on your own," he said. "I won't pay a dime. Not for tuition, not for books, not for a plane ticket home when you fail and come crawling back." My mother tried to intervene, but he silenced her with a look. That night, she came to my room after he was asleep. She sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was little. "Apply to Princeton," she said softly. "If it's meant to be, it will work out." Then she pressed something into my hand. It was a small velvet pouch containing my grandmother's jewelry, a diamond pendant, a pair of pearl earrings. and a gold bracelet. "These were meant for you anyway," she said. "If you need money for anything, you can sell these. Just promise you'll keep the pendant if you can." It was her favorite. I was stunned by this act of rebellion from my usually compliant mother. It gave me the courage to complete my application. For months later, when the acceptance letter arrived, I screamed with joy. Full academic scholarship. My ticket to freedom. My father's reaction was ice cold. "You'll regret this," was all he said. The summer before college was tense, with minimal conversation between us. My mother helped me prepare in secret, buying dorm supplies a little at a time so he wouldn't notice the expense. Kevin, now 15, seemed confused by the conflict, but wished me well in his own awkward teenage way. Moving to Princeton was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, I was completely on my own, responsible for myself, free to make my own decisions. I called home weekly, though the conversations were strained. My father rarely came to the phone. My mother always sounded worried. Only Kevin seemed genuinely interested in my new life. Despite the emotional turmoil, I thrived academically. The challenging coursework, the brilliant professors, the engaged classmates all fed my hungry mind. I made friends slowly but surely, cautious about whom to trust after years of conditional love. It was during my sophomore year that the first seed of suspicion was planted. For a humanities elective, I was researching family genealogy. The assignment was simple. Create a family tree going back at least 3 generations. I contacted my mother for information about relatives I didn't know well, dates of births and deaths. She provided what I needed. But when I requested a copy of my birth certificate for the primary documents section of the project, she became evasive. "Can't you just use the information I gave you? Why do you need the actual certificate?" Eventually, she sent a scanned copy, but something about it looked odd. The formatting seemed different from other birth certificates I'd seen. I might have dismissed it, except for a new friendship that would change everything. Amanda Pearson lived across the hall in my dorm. We bonded over late-night study sessions and a shared love of true crime podcasts. Her mother worked in hospital records administration in Philadelphia. "Records can tell you everything if you know how to read them," Amanda said one night as we discussed a case where DNA evidence had exonerated someone after 20 years. "My mom says the truth is always there in black and white. People just don't always want to see it." I thought about my birth certificate, about the strange comments from relatives over the years, about my father's persistent coldness. A theory began forming in my mind, one I almost didn't dare consider. "Amanda," I said carefully, "if someone wanted to look into their own birth records, how would they do that?" She gave me a curious look. "It depends on what you're looking for. But my mom could probably help." I didn't pursue it immediately. The idea seemed too dramatic, like something from a movie rather than real life. But the question lingered, gathering weight and substance in the back of my mind. Junior year brought another piece to the puzzle. During Christmas break, I overheard a heated argument between my parents. I had come downstairs for water in the middle of the night. Their voices carried from the kitchen. "She's asking questions about family history," my mother said. "What if she figures it out?" "She won't," my father replied. "And even if she did, what difference would it make now? The agreement was she would never know." "You promised me that." "I know what I promised," my mother said, her voice trembling. "But she deserves the truth." "The truth," he said bitterly, "would only hurt everyone involved." "Drop it, Eleanor." I retreated silently up the stairs, my heart pounding. The next morning, I confronted my mother while my father was out. "What agreement?" I asked. "What am I not supposed to know?" Her face went pale. "Caitlin, please. Tell me," I insisted. "I heard you last night. This is about me, isn't it? I have a right to know." She broke down in tears, but refused to explain. "I can't," was all she would say. "I just can't." When I returned to school after that break, I was determined to uncover whatever secret they were keeping. With Amanda's help and her mother's guidance, I began a systematic investigation into my own history. What I discovered would change everything forever. Back at Princeton after that unsettling Christmas break, I couldn't shake the conversation I'd overheard. My parents' words replayed in my mind constantly. The agreement was she would never know. What agreement? What truth was being kept from me? With Amanda's encouragement, I decided to start with the most basic question. Was Richard Miller really my biological father? The simplest way to find out is a DNA test, Amanda said matter-of-factly. They're not even that expensive anymore. She was right. For less than $200, I could get an answer to the question that now consumed me. I ordered the kit online, swabbed my cheek, and sent it off, both terrified and eager to see the results. While waiting, I did more digging. I requested my complete birth records from the hospital where I was born, claiming it was for a medical history project. I studied the birth certificate my mother had reluctantly sent me, comparing it with samples online. There were subtle inconsistencies in the formatting, suggesting it might have been amended at some point. 3 weeks later, the DNA results arrived in my student email. I sat in my dorm room, hands shaking as I opened the message. The ethnic breakdown wasn't surprising, primarily Northern European, matching what I knew of my family background. But the real shock came in the parental analysis. The test concluded with 99.9% certainty that Richard Miller could not be my biological father. I stared at the screen, emotions washing over me in waves. Shock, confusion, then, strangely, relief. There was a reason for his lifelong coldness toward me. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't failed as a daughter. He had failed as a father because he wasn't actually my father. But if not him, then who? Amanda's mother became an invaluable ally in my search for answers. Mrs. Pearson had decades of experience navigating medical records and a deep sense of compassion for my situation. Honey, sometimes the records tell stories that people tried to bury, she told me during a weekend visit to their home in Philadelphia. But everyone deserves to know their own story. With her help, I obtained more detailed records from the hospital where I was born. The original birth certificate had indeed been amended when I was 3 months old, with Richard Miller added as the father. The original listed father unknown. Further investigation revealed prenatal care records for my mother from a different doctor than the one who delivered me. These records mentioned a partner named William Thompson. William Thompson, I whispered, testing the name of the man who might be my biological father. More research, this time through public records and social media, revealed that William Thompson had been a graduate student at the same university where my mother had done her undergraduate degree. They would have been there at the same time. Yearbook photos showed a tall man with my exact eye color and similar facial features. The most devastating discovery came next. William Thompson had died in a car accident just 6 months before I was born. The pieces were falling into place. My mother must have already been dating Richard when she found out she was pregnant with William's child. Richard had agreed to raise me as his own, but clearly resented me from the beginning. The agreement they had argued about was their pact to keep this truth from me forever. But there was more. William Thompson's parents, my potential biological grandparents, were still alive. They lived in Vermont, less than a day's drive from Princeton. Had they known about me? Had they been kept from their son's only child? I found their address and wrote a careful letter, explaining who I was and what I had discovered, including copies of the records I'd gathered and photos of myself. I asked if they would be willing to meet me or at least tell me more about William. 2 weeks later, I received a response that left me sobbing on my dorm room floor. Thomas and Margaret Thompson had suspected their son had fathered a child before his death. My mother had contacted them once when I was a newborn, but then disappeared from their lives. They had tried to find us, but my mother had changed her number and moved away with Richard. We have thought of you every day for 21 years, they wrote. We kept all of William's things, hoping someday we might be able to share them with his child. If you're open to it, we would very much like to meet you. We arranged to meet at a restaurant halfway between Princeton and their home in Vermont. I was so nervous I could barely eat for days before. What if they didn't like me? What if they were disappointed in who I had become? I needn't have worried. The moment Margaret Thompson saw me, she burst into tears and embraced me. You have his eyes, she said. Exactly his eyes. They brought photo albums, William's college journals, even home videos. I spent hours absorbing everything about the man whose DNA I carried, but who I would never meet. He had been studying environmental science, passionate about conservation. He played guitar, loved hiking, and had a dry sense of humor that made his friends adore him. He would have been so proud of you, Thomas told me, his voice breaking. Princeton was his dream school too, though he went to Cornell instead. They also brought something else, the results of their own DNA test, confirming without doubt that I was William's daughter. They had done it as soon as they received my letter, wanting to be certain before meeting me. We have something else for you, Margaret said, handing me a sealed envelope. We thought you might need this someday, though we hope you won't. Inside was irrefutable proof of everything, original copies of correspondence between my mother and the Thompsons, medical records confirming William's paternity, and a letter from their family lawyer documenting their attempts to maintain contact with me as a baby before my mother cut them off. Richard Miller knew about all of this, Thomas said quietly. He made the choice to raise you as his own, then seemingly punished you for it. We've never understood how someone could do that to an innocent child. I put everything back in the envelope and tucked it carefully into my bag. I wasn't sure yet what I would do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront my parents immediately, to demand explanations for the lifetime of lies. But another part wanted to protect myself, to wait for the right moment when I would be emotionally and financially secure enough to handle whatever fallout might come. Take your time, Margaret advised, seeming to read my thoughts. We've waited 21 years to find you. We can wait a little longer for whatever you decide to do next. We parted with promises to stay in touch, which we did regularly over the next year. I learned more about William and his family, about the heritage that was rightfully mine. I kept this relationship secret from my parents, unsure how to broach the subject or if I even wanted to. Senior year arrived, and with it, my selection as graduation speaker due to my academic standing. As I prepared for this milestone, I made a decision. I would wait until after graduation to confront my family with what I knew. I wanted nothing to overshadow my achievement, the culmination of years of hard work. What I didn't anticipate was that my father would make that decision for me, in the most public and cruel way imaginable. Senior year flew by in a blur of thesis writing, job interviews, and secret visits with the Thompsons, who had become a source of warmth and support I'd never experienced from Richard. I maintained minimal contact with my parents, calling home briefly on holidays and sending occasional updates about my academic progress. When I received the email from the dean's office informing me that I had been selected as the student speaker for graduation, I felt a complicated mix of pride and anxiety. This was a tremendous honor, recognizing not just my GPA but my contributions to campus life. I had worked myself to exhaustion to earn this distinction, taking challenging courses, conducting independent research, and volunteering with the campus literacy program. But the thought of my family watching me speak made my stomach knot with tension. Would my father find some way to diminish this achievement too? After careful consideration, I called my mother to share the news. "Oh, Caitlin, that's wonderful," she exclaimed, genuine pleasure in her voice. "We'll all be there, of course. Your father already requested the day off." I was surprised he was planning to attend at all, given our strained relationship and his previous threats to cut me off financially. Though the latter had proven empty, he had continued sending checks for spending money throughout college, Albeit with passive-aggressive notes about supporting your independence, he had never shown any interest in my college experience. "How is he?" I asked cautiously. There was a slight pause. "He's fine. Busy with work, as always. Kevin's been accepted to Yale, so that's been the main topic of conversation lately." Of course it was. Kevin's accomplishments always overshadowed mine. "We're proud of you too," my mother added quickly, as if reading my thoughts. "Very proud." In the weeks leading up to graduation, I threw myself into preparing my speech. The theme I chose was truth and integrity as foundations for success, a topic that felt deeply personal given what I now knew about my own history. "Your words need to inspire, but also challenge," my faculty advisor suggested. "What truth do you want your classmates to carry forward?" The irony wasn't lost on me as I crafted a speech about honesty while sitting on a powder keg of family secrets. I wrote about how true success comes from living authentically, about how facades eventually crumble under their own weight. Every sentence felt like it had a double meaning. 3 days before graduation, my mother called. "I just wanted to warn you," she said, her voice low as if afraid of being overheard. "Your father's in one of his moods. The market's been volatile, and he's under a lot of pressure at work." The familiar warning sent a chill through me. How many times had I heard some version of this growing up? It was always the prelude to walking on eggshells, to carefully monitoring my every word and action to avoid triggering his anger. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "But I'll be fine." "I know you will," she replied. "You always are." "We'll see you Saturday." Graduation morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect May day. I dressed carefully in my apartment, where I'd moved senior year for more privacy. My roommate Zoe helped me style my hair and took photos of me in my cap and gown. "You look amazing," she said. "Like someone who's about to take over the world." I laughed, but her words bolstered my confidence. I did feel powerful in that moment, standing on the threshold of a future I had shaped through my own efforts. The Thompsons had arrived the previous day, staying at a hotel near campus. We had breakfast together before the ceremony, their pride in me evident in every smile, every touch, every word. "We won't intrude on your family time today," Margaret assured me. "We'll just be there in the audience, cheering you on. William would have wanted to be here, but we'll be here for him." Their thoughtfulness brought tears to my eyes. They had brought a small gift, William's class ring from Cornell, now on a chain I could wear beneath my gown, close to my heart. It gave me strength. When I arrived at the graduation venue, I spotted my family almost immediately. My mother looked elegant, but tense in a blue dress, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Kevin, now 18 and about to start his own college journey, stood awkwardly in a suit that made him look older than his years. And my father, immaculate as always in an expensive charcoal suit, his expression impassive as he checked his watch. I approached them, accepting my mother's embrace and Kevin's fist bump. "Congratulations, sis," he said. "This is pretty cool." My father extended his hand formally, as if greeting a business associate rather than his daughter. "Caitlin," he said with a nod. Something in his tone made me pause. There was an edge there, a coldness beyond his usual reserve. But before I could analyze it further, I was called away for the processional lineup. "I need to go," I said. "I'll see you after the ceremony. Our department is having a small reception." "We'll be there," my mother promised, squeezing my arm. As I took my place in line, I glanced back at them. My mother was speaking intently to my father, who seemed to be barely listening. Kevin was already on his phone, thumbs flying over the screen. They looked like any other family at graduation, but I knew the currents running beneath the surface were anything but normal. The ceremony began with all the pomp and circumstance these occasions demand. The procession, the national anthem, the welcome from the university president. I sat on the stage with the other speakers and honored students, occasionally scanning the audience. I spotted the Thompsons, sitting toward the back, their faces beaming with pride. My own family was closer to the front, my mother attentive, my father stoic, Kevin trying not to look bored. As the dean began announcing the honors graduates, I felt a flutter of anticipation. Soon it would be my turn to speak, to share the words I had carefully crafted. For once, my father would have to listen to me, would have to acknowledge my achievement in this public setting. What I didn't know was that he had his own plans for public acknowledgement, one that would turn what should have been my moment of triumph into something entirely unexpected. As my name was called, followed by summa cum laude, recipient of the Wilson Prize for Academic Excellence, and our student speaker, I rose from my seat, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the podium. I never made it there. Caitlin Miller, summa cum laude, recipient of the Wilson Prize for Academic Excellence, and our student speaker, the dean announced, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. I stood, heart swelling with pride despite my nerves, and took my first steps toward the podium. The applause was generous, my classmates showing their support. I caught sight of my mother's face, shining with tears and unmistakable pride. Then it happened. "She's not my real daughter anyway," came a loud, clear voice from the family section. The words sliced through the applause like a knife. I froze mid-step, blood rushing in my ears. Surely I had misheard. Surely my father hadn't just said that. Here, now, in front of thousands of people. But he had. Richard Miller was on his feet, his face flushed with either anger or alcohol, I couldn't tell which. "Richard, please," my mother hissed, tugging at his sleeve. He shook her off. "No, I'm done pretending," he announced, his voice carrying in the sudden shocked silence. "I'm done supporting a girl who has shown nothing but ingratitude for everything I've given her." The dean stepped forward, clearly uncertain how to handle this unprecedented disruption. "Sir, perhaps we could discuss this after the ceremony." My father ignored him, addressing the crowd as if making a presentation at work. "I've paid for her education, given her every advantage. And what do I get in return? Disrespect, defiance. She couldn't even attend the college I chose for her." I remained frozen in place, my body seemingly disconnected from my brain. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. "Richard, stop it," my mother pleaded, now standing beside him. Kevin sat motionless, his face a mask of mortification. "You know what?" my father continued, his voice growing louder. "I'm done. As of today, I'm cutting her off completely. No more financial support, no more connection. Let her see how far her precious Princeton degree takes her without my backing." Gasps rippled through the audience. Parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some of my professors looked appalled. My classmates stared in disbelief. "I've always known she wasn't mine biologically," he said, the words hitting me like physical blows. I was a fool to think raising another man's child would ever work out. Blood tells in the end. My mother sobbed openly now, trying to pull him back into his seat. "Please, not like this," she begged. The dean had reached my side, his hand gentle on my elbow. "Ms. Miller, would you like to postpone your speech?" he murmured. Something crystallized inside me in that moment. The years of emotional abuse, the withholding of affection, the constant criticism, all of it suddenly made perfect sense. And the fact that he had chosen this moment, this public celebration of my achievement, to humiliate me spoke volumes about who Richard Miller truly was. "No," I said clearly, straightening my shoulders. "I'd like to proceed." The dean looked uncertain but nodded, escorting me the rest of the way to the podium. My legs moved mechanically, my mind racing. The speech I had prepared suddenly seemed irrelevant, disconnected from the reality of this moment. As I reached the podium and looked out at the sea of shocked faces, I made a split-second decision that would change everything. My hand went in my purse, where I kept the envelope the Thompsons had given me, the evidence I had been saving for a private confrontation after graduation. There would be no after-graduation conversation now. My father had made sure of that. I stood at the podium, silent for several long seconds. The audience waited, tension thick in the air. My father remained standing, my mother beside him, her makeup streaked with tears. Kevin stared at the ground. In the back of the auditorium, I spotted the Thompsons. Their faces reflecting concern and support even from a distance. I took a deep breath and leaned toward the microphone. I was going to give a speech about truth and integrity, I began. My voice steadier than I felt. It seems especially appropriate now. I paused, meeting my father's defiant stare directly. Since we're sharing DNA secrets, I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word, I think it's only fair that everyone gets the whole truth today. The audience was utterly silent, collectively holding its breath. Even my father seemed momentarily taken aback by my composure. What Mr. Miller just announced is partially correct. He is not my biological father. I removed the envelope from my purse, holding it up so everyone could see it. What he failed to mention is that he has known this fact since before I was born. I pulled out the first document, a hospital record dated 22 years ago. This is a paternity acknowledgement form signed by Richard Miller when I was 3 months old. He legally and knowingly claimed paternity, despite being aware I was not his biological child. My father's face registered shock. He clearly hadn't expected me to have documentation. My biological father, I continued, was William Thompson, a graduate student who died in a car accident 6 months before I was born. My mother was already dating Richard when she discovered she was pregnant. He agreed to raise me as his own. I looked directly at my mother, whose expression had shifted from despair to astonishment. What Richard also didn't mention is that he has spent the last 22 years punishing the child he chose to claim for simply existing, for not having his DNA, for being a reminder of a relationship that preceded him. I pulled out another document. I've known the truth for almost a year now. I discovered it through a DNA test and research into my birth records. I've been in contact with William Thompson's parents, my biological grandparents, who are here today. Murmurs swept through the crowd. My father's face had gone from red to white. He finally sat down, my mother sinking into her seat beside him. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn, I said, removing another paper from the envelope. During my investigation, I discovered something that I believe even my mother doesn't know. I paused, considering the weight of what I was about to reveal. The dean shifted uncomfortably beside me, but made no move to stop me. This had gone far beyond a normal graduation speech, but sometimes the truth demanded to be heard. 3 months ago, I took a DNA sample from my brother Kevin's hairbrush. I looked at Kevin apologetically. I'm sorry, but I needed to know if we shared at least one biological parent. Kevin's head snapped up, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. The results showed that Kevin and I do not share a father, which wasn't surprising. But we also do not share a mother. Gasps echoed through the auditorium. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Further investigation revealed that Kevin is the biological son of my mother's sister, Patricia, and Richard Miller. He was born while Patricia was unmarried and facing financial difficulties. My mother agreed to raise him as her own to avoid family scandal. My father stood again, his face contorted with rage. This is absurd. You're making this up. I removed the final document, a certified DNA analysis with highlighted sections. The science doesn't lie, Richard. Kevin is your biological son. But Eleanor is not his biological mother. Patricia is. I glanced toward a specific section of the audience where I knew my Aunt Patricia was seated. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, her expression confirming everything. So while you've spent 22 years rejecting me for not being your biological child, you've been hiding the fact that my brother is actually my cousin. You've constructed an entire family on secrets and lies, then had the audacity to punish me for a circumstance I had no control over. Security personnel had moved closer to my father, who looked like he might rush the stage. My mother sat immobile, shock rendering her speechless. I wasn't planning to reveal any of this today, I said, addressing the wider audience again. I wanted to protect this family despite everything. But when Mr. Miller chose to publicly disown and humiliate me at my college graduation, he left me no choice but to set the record straight. I carefully replaced the documents in the envelope and set it aside. Then I pulled out my original speech notes. Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to deliver the graduation address I was invited to give about truth, integrity, and building a future based on authentic values rather than convenient lies. The dean nodded, seemingly relieved to return to something resembling the planned program. As I began my prepared speech, I noticed movement in the family section. My father was leaving, pushing past other seated guests with no apology. My mother remained, her face ashen. Kevin sat beside her, looking shell-shocked, and my Aunt Patricia had moved to sit beside them, her hand reaching for Kevin's in a gesture that confirmed everything I had revealed. I delivered my speech with surprising calm, speaking about how our generation had the opportunity and responsibility to build lives and careers founded on honesty and ethical choices. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but the words seemed to take on new meaning in light of what had just transpired. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. My classmates rose in a standing ovation, their support a balm to my raw emotions. I caught sight of the Thompsons, also on their feet, tears streaming down their faces. As I returned to my seat, the dean leaned in. "That was the most extraordinary graduation speech I've ever witnessed," he murmured. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though all right seemed an inadequate description for what I was feeling. Exposed, vindicated, terrified, relieved. They all mingled together in a storm of emotion I could barely contain. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur. When it was over, I made my way through crowds of classmates offering support and congratulations. Some looked uncomfortable, unsure what to say after witnessing such a personal explosion. Others were openly supportive. "That took incredible courage," my roommate Zoe said, hugging me tightly. "Your father's a jerk," another friend declared. "You're better off without him." Perhaps they were right. But untangling oneself from family, even toxic family, is never simple or painless. I spotted Kevin standing alone near the reception area, looking lost. I approached him cautiously. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said. "I would have told you privately if he hadn't forced my hand." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Is it really true? About Aunt Patricia?" I nodded. "The DNA test is conclusive. I have copies of everything if you want to see it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like our father Richard's that it was jarring to recognize. "My whole life has been a lie." "Not a lie," I said gently. "Just more complicated than we knew. Mom raised you. She loves you. That's real. And my father just publicly humiliated both of us," he added, a flash of anger crossing his face. "That's real too," I acknowledged. After a moment's hesitation, he hugged me awkwardly. "Congratulations on graduating. And on your speech. It was pretty badass, actually." I laughed, surprised by his reaction. "Thanks. What will you do now?" He shrugged. "Go home, I guess. Try to sort through all this. Maybe talk to Patricia." He stumbled over the name, not ready to call her Mom. "Call me if you need to talk," I offered. "This is a lot to process." He nodded and walked away, shoulders hunched against a reality that had suddenly become much more complicated. The Thompsons found me next, wrapping me in a family embrace that felt more genuine than anything I'd experienced from Richard in 22 years. "We are so proud of you," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for your academic achievements, but for your courage today." "William would have stood and cheered," Margaret added, squeezing my hand. As we spoke, I saw my mother approaching hesitantly, her face still bearing the traces of tears. Caitlin, she began, then stopped when she saw who I was with. Recognition dawned on her face. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Hello, Eleanor, Margaret said, her tone carefully neutral. It's been a long time. My mother nodded, clearly struggling for words. I'm sorry, she finally said. For everything. For keeping Caitlin from you. For not being brave enough to tell the truth. The apology hung in the air between us. The beginning of a conversation that would need much more time and privacy than this moment allowed. Perhaps we could all meet tomorrow, I suggested. There's a lot we need to discuss. They agreed, and my mother turned to me, her eyes pleading. Can we talk alone for a few minutes? I excused myself from the Thompsons and followed her to a quiet corner of the reception area. I never wanted any of this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping the secrets. Were you protecting me? I asked. Or were you protecting Richard? She had no answer for that, which was an answer in itself. I need time, I told her. Today was supposed to be about celebrating an achievement I worked incredibly hard for. Instead, it became about family secrets and public humiliation. I'm not ready to forgive that. She nodded. Fresh tears spilling. I understand. Just please don't shut me out completely. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I do love you, Caitlin. I always have. I know, I said, softening slightly. And I love you too. But love isn't enough without honesty and respect. We all need to learn that lesson. As she walked away, I felt a strange lightness. The secrets that had shadowed my life were now in the open. The father who had never truly been a father had removed himself from my life. And somehow, amid all this chaos, I had found my voice and my truth. The future stretching before me was uncertain but genuinely mine for the first time. Whatever came next would be built on honesty, not secrets. On my terms, not anyone else's. In the most unexpected way, this graduation truly had become a commencement, a beginning, not just an ending. The days following graduation passed in a blur of emotional conversations and new beginnings. My carefully planned post-graduation celebrations with friends took on a different tone as news of the ceremony's dramatic events spread across campus. People treated me with a mixture of fascination and compassion, unsure how to respond to someone whose family had imploded so publicly. Are you really okay? My roommate Zoe asked repeatedly. Concern etched on her face. The truth was, I didn't know. I fluctuated between feeling empowered by finally speaking my truth and devastated by the public nature of it all. But one thing remained certain. I couldn't go back to pretending. The day after graduation, I met with my mother, the Thompsons, and surprisingly, my Aunt Patricia. We gathered at a quiet restaurant off campus, the tension palpable as we took our seats. I want to understand everything, I said firmly. No more secrets, no more half-truths. And so, piece by piece, the full story emerged. My mother had been dating William Thompson seriously when she discovered she was pregnant. They had planned to marry. But his tragic accident left her alone and afraid. Richard Miller, a friend who had always had feelings for her, stepped in with an offer, marriage, security, and a father for her child. I thought I was doing the right thing, my mother explained, her voice barely above a whisper. I was 23, grieving, pregnant, and terrified. Richard seemed like salvation. But the arrangement had come with unspoken costs. Richard had insisted that William's parents be kept away, that I never know about my biological father. He was threatened by William's memory. Patricia interjected. Even dead, William was his rival. And then when Caitlin was born looking so much like him. Why didn't you tell me? I asked my mother directly. She looked down at her hands. At first, I was honoring my agreement with Richard. Then, as years passed, it seemed impossible to unravel the lie without destroying everything. I convinced myself it was better for you not to know. Then came the revelation about Kevin. Patricia, 5 years younger than my mother. had become involved with Richard during a rough patch in my parents' marriage. The pregnancy had been unplanned, and with Patricia unmarried and just starting her career, my mother had offered to raise the child as her own. It was my idea, my mother insisted. Patricia was in no position to be a mother, and I thought. She paused. I thought having a child that was biologically his might make Richard love me more, might make our family work. Patricia wiped away tears. I've regretted giving Kevin up every day, but I told myself he had a better life with two parents who could provide for him. Does Kevin know you're his biological mother? I asked. We spoke last night, Patricia confirmed. He's angry and confused, but he agreed to meet with me privately next week. The Thompsons had listened quietly throughout these revelations. Now Thomas spoke up. We tried to be part of Caitlin's life from the beginning, he said. We wrote letters, sent gifts. Eventually, all were returned. The phone number was changed. And you moved without forwarding information. Richard insisted, my mother said. He said it would only confuse Caitlin to have another set of grandparents who weren't related to him. So instead, I grew up with a father who resented me for not being his biological child, while my actual biological father's parents, who wanted to love me, were kept away. I summarized. The injustice of it all hitting me anew. Margaret reached across the table to take my hand. We're here now, she said simply. We've lost 22 years. But we don't have to lose any more time. That meeting was the first of many as we all navigated this new reality. Richard remained notably absent, refusing all contact. Kevin oscillated between anger and confusion, sometimes lashing out, sometimes withdrawing completely. The carefully constructed family narrative had been shattered, leaving all of us to figure out what came next. A month after graduation, I met with my former department head at Princeton, who had kindly offered career guidance. Your job offers haven't been affected by the, graduation incident, he assured me. In fact, if anything, the way you handled it has impressed people. You showed remarkable poise under extraordinary circumstances. I accepted a position with an environmental consulting firm in Burlington, Vermont, not coincidentally located just 20 minutes from the Thompsons' home. The chance to build a relationship with my biological grandparents outweighed the more prestigious offers in New York and Boston. My mother, in a move that shocked everyone, filed for divorce from Richard 6 weeks after graduation. I should have done it years ago, she told me during one of our weekly phone calls. I stayed because I thought a broken home would hurt you and Kevin more than an unhappy one. I was wrong. She found a small apartment, started therapy, and began rebuilding her relationship with Patricia. The sisters, estranged for years due to the secrets between them, slowly found their way back to each other. Kevin decided to defer his acceptance to Yale for a year, taking time to process everything and develop a relationship with Patricia. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed during one of our infrequent but meaningful conversations. I need to figure that out before I try to become someone else. As for Richard, he made several attempts to discredit me publicly, claiming I had fabricated the DNA evidence. But as more family members confirmed the truth, his efforts backfired, further damaging his reputation. Eventually, he moved to Chicago for a new job, removing himself from the family he had helped fracture. 6 months after graduation, we held a different kind of family gathering. The Thompsons hosted a memorial for William at their home, inviting my mother, Patricia, Kevin, and several of William's old friends. We shared stories, looked at photographs, and for the first time, I felt connected to the man who had given me life. He would have been so proud of the woman you've become, one of his college roommates told me. You have his determination, his sense of justice. My mother, watching me interact with these people who had known William, seemed both sad and relieved. I should have done this years ago, she said quietly. I let fear guide too many of my decisions. 1 year after the graduation that had changed everything, I found myself sitting on the Thompsons' porch, watching the sunset over the green mountains. Margaret brought out iced tea and sat beside me. "How are you really doing with all of this?" she asked. "The truth." I considered the question carefully. "I'm still processing," I admitted. "Some days I'm angry about the years we lost, the lies I was told. Other days I'm grateful that the truth finally came out, that I found you and Thomas." "Family is complicated," she said. "Blood matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. Love, honesty, showing up for each other, those things matter just as much, maybe more." She was right. Over the past year, I had learned that family could be redefined, rebuilt, chosen. My biological father would always be a mystery to me in some ways, known only through stories and photographs. But his parents had become a vital part of my life, offering unconditional love I had rarely experienced. My relationship with my mother was healing slowly as she took responsibility for her choices and worked to become more authentic. Kevin and I were developing a different kind of sibling bond, based on shared experience rather than shared DNA. Even Patricia had become someone important in my life, an aunt who understood the complexity of our family better than most. As for Richard, I had come to accept that some relationships cannot and should not be saved. His rejection had been painful, but it had also freed me from a lifetime of seeking approval I would never receive. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been panic attacks in the middle of the night, moments of rage that took my breath away, periods of grief for the family I thought I had. But there had also been unexpected joy in discovering new connections, in being truly seen and accepted by the Thompsons, in building relationships based on truth rather than obligation. I had learned that healing isn't linear. It comes in fits and starts, in small moments of clarity and connection. Most importantly, I had learned that while we cannot choose the circumstances of our birth or the secrets our families keep, we can choose how we respond to those truths once they're revealed. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In that moment of beauty, I felt something settle within me, a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find so soon. "I think," I said finally, "that I'm going to be okay. Better than okay." Margaret squeezed my hand, and we sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Truth, no matter how painful, brings its own kind of freedom. My graduation day had not gone as planned, but it had given me something far more valuable than a perfect ceremony. It had given me an authentic life, built on honesty instead of convenient lies. And that, I realized, was the greatest commencement gift of all. Have you ever had to confront a difficult family truth? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through difficult times. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that truth, however painful, eventually sets us free. Thank you for listening to my story today. And remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see your value.